I mean, that to me is the best part ever. Like I literally got paid to like go tell bosses off or to like shut down McDonald's all afternoon and like just like the amount. I mean, I've gotten arrested a bunch. Like, I mean, I just was the professional route.
Can you
like,
tell us about some of these arrests? You don't have to if you don't want to, but if they're fun stories, I'm down to hear them.
They're pretty fun. First one's pretty fun. I'm like, just get the job for the union just as a temporary organizer right away. And so it's only like a 3 months during the campaign, allegedly. We're debriefing and I'm like, I thought get not fired, but it's just like the end of my contract. It was like another week out. Yep. And they're like, hey, we need people to go to Houston and get arrested because we're organizing all these undocumented workers. And they like can't take the arrest. And so I was like, okay, I'm game. And we go down to Houston and the people previously had gotten arrested and they got out right away. But then they had us chain ourselves and then use these PVC pipes also. So we were like connected to each other, but then had these pipes to make it just super hard for the police to get us. And they came at us in Houston with all these horses, like police on these Clydesdale horses. I got dragged like 20 feet with this woman I was connected to, and she broke her wrist. And then we got in the middle of these two horses where we're about to get killed. Like it's literally keeps going like this, and her wrist is shattered, and she's like freaking out. I'm like, we're gonna die if you don't sweep your arm underneath the next time that it lifts its arms up.
Frogland presents All Chill, No Shill, a podcast born out of the desire to hear more than elevator pitches. Today on All Chill, No Shill, we have Gabe Weis, artist, founder of the Stoadex, launching soon. We have a bit of a tradition going probably way further back than we should. So you want to tell me what your early days of fighting the good fight taught you?
I mean, taught me a million different things, but I mean, I think it's so easy to sell out in this world. And so if you can ever get a career or do something where you don't have to, I highly recommend staying there. And for me, that meant community organizing and politics for most of my career. Used to work in the Senate for a while, worked to help schools here in California. And then I worked for a union that represented state workers. I also took some time off to run some campaigns, was super active in the Fight for 15, which was to get fast food workers here in the Bay Area $15 an hour. So I've just kind of been on the front lines of pretty much every progressive cause of the last 20 years. I would say I probably was as close to the front lines as you can be.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about it a little bit earlier, the purpose that comes with doing something that like aligns with your values. It doesn't make it painless by any means, but it gives you like that internal drive of it. There's that like hardcore, you know that you're working to help people, you know you're working to do better for people. Like you're trying to bring more than you take, which I always appreciate that. There's a lot of, the world needs more of that.
I think very much so. And it's funny because it always bled into my artwork. So I would paint every night, late night at night. And like, there's always like kind of two faces in my work. And one is this political side, and then one is this artistic side. And I always kind of felt guilty making art because it was like that's time that could be spent on helping humanity more in politics. And art always felt a little bit like a selfish pursuit. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't really until I started having success in NFTs and start seeing that I could make a really big impact from my art that got me to switch and come out of politics and go to full-time artist. So yeah. It's funny how much it, I guess, comes full circle.
Yeah, my wife does art. It kind of like it helps her stay sane. She's a scientist, so there's a lot of like non-creative scientists, but there's the I always like I'm like it's better luck for us. But the studies are out there that like most of the Nobel Prize artists or scientists, most of the people they had a like pretty serious creative passion outside of their main work. And I think that honestly, like developing creativity is always a huge one. It's good for your health because I kind of believe that like if you don't get that energy out, it like turns bad, I guess, if that makes sense. So like I definitely had periods for me where like my camera was like my therapist because I couldn't afford a therapist at the time kind of thing.
Yeah.
But gave me something to stay out of trouble and kind of like be able to disengage a little bit. And I'd imagine that if you're dealing with some pretty heavy stuff, just being able to, yeah. I mean, if you're talking about the side of feel like guilt around just even pursuing something you enjoy, that's tough. And I can definitely relate. I bounce back between like, do I need to have a project that is like helping a broad category, or do I need to like build up my own career? And usually they feed into each other. But projects, I feel like they always have more potential to go further than me as an individual.
I think that's right. I don't know. For me, it was just impact. And I've always just tried to maximize my impact into the world as much as possible. But I think maybe that's some Catholic guilt that I grew up with that luckily is long gone. But yeah, I definitely, probably
Hey, the stuff when we're
always
little
will be there.
Yeah, the stuff when we're little sticks. I was
Yeah.
I'm headed off to a wedding dinner after, and the family, it's my best friend's family, and they were a lot more like they were probably the only Democrats in the tiny town. Like I grew up in a town of 350, so they were probably like the only ones. They used to talk about topics like social topics, stuff like that. And it wasn't until like recently I realized like they talked about it, but they never taught us how to like do things or how to like help be part of the change. And up here where I'm at, like I'm the only person my age that's ever at a city council meeting. Like there just isn't, it's like we don't get taught how to be like participate in civics.
Yeah, I think that's all intentional, to be honest. I think if everyone in the country knew how powerful and much of an impact you can make as an individual, then the powers that be would be shaking in their boots. So
Oh
I kind of
yeah.
feel like almost everything in society is built about making you feel powerless.
Yep. Well, and that's why they say knowledge is power. It's not probably about like being the smartest, you know. There's brilliance and that might lead you to innovation, but there's a lot of systems and just even the people that like work in them, half the time they don't know how they operate or they're frustrated. So of course it's like discouraging to anybody that really wants to step up and do something. But
Yeah.
it's cool that you've been able to bridge that gap, and then you kind of nodded to the fact that purpose or that passion didn't disappear.
No, and I mean, I think NFTs can be the revolution or the best thing we've maybe ever had as far as actually changing the world. So if you get a lot of Nyla Hazes around the country where 12, 13-year-old like African American young girls are becoming millionaires and then are doing all sorts of stuff to lift up other young artists, like that to me is where like it's just a unique opportunity we've never had before. So it's like by coming in and like doing anything I can to help the kind of projects that I see just have a very good North Star and are about stuff. Like I just think the sky's the limit as far as like what happened just from being in politics. It takes resources to make an impact. And so what happens when you get thousands of people like me that all of a sudden now have the resources to take on the powers that be? So like, I think you're going to see a lot of FUD for NFTs for years to come, because I think the powers that be know that like this is kind of like a paradigm shifting moment Where if we're going to give the resources to creatives around the world, like you better believe that we're going to turn that against kind of structures that aren't working for anyone.
Oh yeah. And there's never been a point where there's been more, you look back through art history and stuff like that, a ton of politics is not necessarily led by artists, but a lot of really big statements are made by artists. I think it's going to be an interesting world when artists kind of mature into the communication skills needed to be able to really spin stuff up. And then honestly, like for me, I always look at it, I'm like, resource poverty is such a pain in the ass, because like there's people that would go, like you look at artists and it's like artists are usually the entrepreneurs that end up going and making like a community hotspot because their community lacked that. And there's nothing wrong with like economic development or VC or any of that. In the worlds where I was in economic development, there was always like one or two people that I was like, oh, I wish that there was more like this. And they would typically consider themselves community developers. And even in that financial, older system, it's funny to see that bridge of like, I think in the talk that was just going on that you were in, somebody mentioned that artists don't have communities, they have collectors. And I think right now I was like, I don't know that I would disagree with that. I think there is probably communities, but when I look at communities as far as PFP projects, I do think that those are communities. But I think with a lot of artists, it's fans or it's collectors. And there isn't like, for one, it's almost an awkward place to put an artist to be like, hey, let's build an entire community that's solely focused on you. Because it's like, they can't. Go for it.
I think that's a super interesting like distinction, and I wanted to hop in, but then I would just have been like almost just inherently shilling my Stoics project, because I really am
trying the solution
balance.
For it.
I kind of do think it is, in the sense that I want to have incentives and structures. So like each one of my PFP, not each, but like a lot of them have special utilities. So there's like owls, and there's 222 of them. And if they meet twice a year, and if the floor on OpenSea is the same or higher than the previous meeting, then they all get a free mint, for example. And it's like all of a sudden you have a bunch of people that have aligned interests and are a community. And then I have a lot of traits where I essentially say there will be utility, like the Stoic Council is going to vote on it, but you're going to have to work as groups to figure out what you want your utility to be. And so I think from community organizing, like very few people are willing to actually empower people around them. And that's the difference, I guess, between community and followers or fans. And so I do think right now I have a lot of fans and collector base, but I actually think I'm one of the few artists who has community, because I've shown up at so many IRL events, because I've called people at all hours of the night and coached them and helped them. Like, it is the other artists in my community, but it is collectors too. And it is, but other than them buying my art and then making a profit on it, there hasn't been this perfect alignment where we could kind of really build together, other than I kind of like, I help them, they help me type of thing. And so I really wanted to gamify and create a PFP that would empower people to come up and find ways that we can all benefit.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. I think people, like artists, are still struggling to figure out that they are different than PFP projects, which kind of always is a little bit crazy to me, especially even now, just because like I figured it at top height, it would make sense, like try to go be a one of one artist. But, and I mean, I went through that decision process too. I was like, I don't want to go that route. If I'm going to get into NFTs, I want to go be a part of a community, because that's the part that I'm lacking in real life as an artist. And I had plenty of fans, but I was really like, I wanted to have conversations or connections with people that were deeper than like, oh, that's a beautiful picture. And then I have the response like, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And it doesn't really lead to a deeper conversation. It doesn't really lead to like, being able to have conversations that are not for the sake of like, not everything else is fake, but kind of open up and have a real like dialogue a little bit and be a human. But yeah, my comments are probably not the space for that, but.
I mean, no. And some of it to me, it's not like everything has to be IRL, but it is harder and it's easier to judge people's intentions a little bit for me. I think on Twitter Spaces or early Clubhouse or Discord, there's just kind of a thirstiness. Like people are really nice to me, but I have a large following. I'm very well connected, and you can kind of just like see people trying to like score points to be my friend versus when you're having a beer with someone, you can tell kind of through eye contact and whatnot, like, do they actually want to be here? Or are they just like trying to use like my clout or whatever?
Yeah. So with great power comes responsibility, or great responsibility.
Yeah.
What have you learned? Like real lessons have you learned in the last like year and a half? Because I know you weren't full-time art prior to that. You're in the Bay Area, which has probably got enough like high-end art that you at least, I don't know if you're familiar with that world, but probably more so than I am up here in rural Montana.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's showing up every day. I think one thing that I've been cognizant of, and I haven't really heard other artists talk about too much, is like, to me, it's like fine art, but it's still a trading card. And like people are just like, I just make art and it just happens to be NFTs. Like, I don't think that actually is what an NFT is per se. I think NFTs can be a million different things, and sure, it can just be the art, but it can be utility. It can be a deeper connection with the collector. I think it can also, if there's a lot of artists who I just don't think are even remotely mindful of their collection or their floor prices, or are they making collectors money? And I think that is just a big mistake. Like, I think so I'm a strategist and an artist, and I, from the get-go, like, how do I strategize this so that I always have demand, that I always sell out quickly? Because if I can sell out quickly and then always have demand, then I get to make a bunch of art and put it out. Whereas I might have been able to if I had just put out everything I did this last year at one big dump right when I started, I don't think I would have had even close to the success that I had. It'd be night and day. And I think some people kind of just do that. They just dump 30, 40 NFTs on the market, and then they one or two sell, and then they're like, NFTs aren't for me.
Yeah.
Whereas like, I'm like, sell out, then release something so that at all times there's demand for your work, and it doesn't look like you can just buy it at any time that they want, because then people will just move on to the next thing or forget about you by the next day. So just to go back to make good art, not saying that there isn't amazing art in NFTs. I would say though that if you don't understand that it's a device for making, like, for the vast majority of collectors, they have eyes on making money someday off of it. There's the amount of patrons of the arts who don't want to make money and just want to collect to help other artists is a pretty small group of folks.
Yeah. And I feel like I was listening to different clubhouses, listening to different spaces, and I don't know if there was a point too where it almost got toxic in a different direction, because everybody was like, oh, NFTs are the chance for artists to become, wildly successful. And you have all these people that are either, one, haven't been creating for years, so they don't understand that angle of it, or their work isn't quite matured yet. But you also end up with a lot of people, like, they're either switching over, they're kind of coming into the space with an expectation, and then that expectation kind of ends up being like, I would say shill marketing, just coming from that side, like we talked earlier, I like things to happen that are unique and interesting versus just, like I'm, and maybe it's just, I don't have the patience for it, but I'm not one to just go and like post stuff on Twitter posts and stuff like that. I'm more of a shit poster. Like I'll send you a picture of 4 or 5 Stoic philosophy books. That has nothing to do with it, because like that's more what I'm interested than sitting there and trying to sell somebody on stuff. And that's probably, I've been lucky in the positioning. So, but I can 100% put myself back in the space where I was when it was like everything was just like life or death. Like right. I got to make sales or I'm not eating or whatever. But I've also intentionally like, man, I keep my costs so low. It's insane. Like all of my product is all scrap and salvage right now. And like, there's a resourcefulness to like, I can't make those in-person, connections. Mostly just, I can, I have to drive down to California. But yeah, I figure there's a side of like, where artists get creative with how you get out there. And I feel like there's not a lot of creative, like there's not as many people finding creative ways to like get their work out there as they probably should be.
I just couldn't agree more. And I mean, it's a big part of the Stoics is that there are a lot of hand-drawn pieces that I then kind of put what I'm calling mask on top. And there are a lot of them are old books, old maps, phone books, things that I've kind of used in my art, particularly during the pandemic. I had a lot of success on Instagram. By success, I just mean lots of likes and all that jazz. No, yep. But like people love the fact that I was drawing on like cereal boxes with a Sharpie, and just kind of this attitude of like, you might not be able to get to an art store right now, but you can always make art. Mm-hmm. And I think I was just at VCon, and I think a lot of people have told me I was like the most viral thing that happened at VCon, because I was just drawing my little Stoics for everyone, and that was your chance to get on the allow list if you got a one-on-one Gabe Weis. Okay. And like, I'm going to be doing that in New York, NFT NYC here next week too. And my take on it is, if someone gets handed a 101 already to start the collection, they're like, have that much more reason not to just dump when the market goes south or whatever. Yeah, you have a deeper connection to it. So like, I want to have those relationships with collectors. And then also it gives me a second or 2 minutes to give a little spiel about why I think the Stoics is different and awesome. And a lot of times you don't necessarily get that. So all to say, I think there's a million ways to be resourceful. And my years of community organizing, I mean, there's so many times where I was always going up against corporate America. So like there was never a time when I wasn't outspent like considerably. And so you just learn really, really like early on how to be scrappy and resourceful. And I think it's just super important for artists.
Yeah. And the interesting part too is like you build up the fan base, and then the expectation is like you're just going to say, hey, go do the thing, and like the whole world's going to move. At least in my minor experiences with it, even having a really active fan base, like you're basically just priming and having people kind of like around and with positive feelings towards your work. And then when you do have something that like strikes a chord with you on that purpose point, you can speak from such a point of passion that like it will move mountains. Like we had one where like we had a cleanup, and it was a stupid little, like it's tiny because it's just a small town, but it was like a 35-year dumping ground, like unofficial dumping ground. People go shoot stuff there. It just was, you could see the garbage piles from space, like Google Earth. And we went up to the mayor of town because 2 high schoolers had come to us and were like, hey man, we drive up in our truck every summer and like take some truckloads out, but it doesn't even make a dent. Can you like tell some people about it maybe? And I was like, yeah, we'll go try and see what we can do, get the city involved. And the mayor just told us, yeah, it's been that way for 35 years. You're never going to change it. And so we literally were, I'm like, the FU is I feel like where my best stuff comes from, is like somebody being like, yeah, we don't care and not worth our time. And we had like 250 people on a Tuesday at like 10 o'clock and pulled out 14 tons of trash. And it was just literally rolled up to it, did a drone video of like the beautiful mountains and just panned down to the ground where it was all trash. And we're like, hey, who else wants to help? And because you have that like prepped audience, you can get to those people.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's very much up my alley of all the ways I organized and, try to piss people off here and there.
I'm like, I'm not a bad person. Just sometimes I'm like, hey, I think that this isn't right. Something's gotta be done.
That to me is the best part ever. Like, I literally got paid to like go tell bosses off or to like shut down McDonald's all afternoon, and like just like the amount. I mean, I've gotten arrested a bunch. Like, I mean, I just was a professional route.
Can you tell us about some of these arrests? You don't have to if you don't want to, but if they're fun stories, I'm down to hear them.
They're pretty fun. First one's pretty fun. I'm like, just get the job for the union just as a temporary organizer right away. And so it's only like a 3 months during the campaign, allegedly. We're debriefing, and I'm like I thought get not fired, but it's just like the end of my contract. It was like another week out. And they're like, hey, we need people to go to Houston and get arrested because we're organizing all these undocumented workers, and they like can't take the arrest. And so I was like, okay, I'm game. And we go down to Houston, and the people previously had gotten arrested and they got out right away. But then they had us chain ourselves and then use these PVC pipes also. So we were like connected to each other, but then had these pipes to make it just super hard for the police to get us. And they came at us in Houston with all of these horses, like police on these Clydesdale horses. I got dragged like 20 feet with this woman I was connected to, and she broke her wrist. And then we got in the middle of these two horses where we're about to get killed. Like, it's literally keeps going like this, and her wrist is shattered and she's like freaking out. I'm like, we're going to die if you don't sweep your arm underneath the next time that it lifts its arms up. So the horse does that. We just jump up against a van that was right there and just like push up against it while this horse is like trying to kill us.
Just going insane.
And then then we get arrested. They keep me in chains for 14 hours, not chains like those rubber ties, which are worse than chains. And so I'm a little punk at this, I'm 23, I don't know, maybe 24, but I just don't take a lot of shit at that time. And it's this gruff Houston cop who's like 55. He's just most stereotypical, like cop you could imagine.
Oh, yeah.
And they have to have, I'm the last person to get checked in, and they had done that because I yelled when they were taking off when they were taking off my handcuffs. We had also put a bunch of tape around it to just make it the hardest ever to get us out. So the cop starts throwing the tape on the ground, and I go, "Citizens arrest, littering." And
yes.
I'm
sure that went very well.
Yeah, I'm sure they were just like, and this person's going to be in cuffs for 14 hours. And then when they're booking me, their last question was like, have you had any amputations? And I go, does foreskin count? And then he goes, it has to be something major. And I was like, I had a lot of foreskin. And this 55-year-old cop you could tell he's so pissed off, but he starts kind of like chuckling and he starts telling, he's like, I've been booking people for 30 years. No one's ever had the balls to say something like that to me. it's like, I don't know, the whole thing. We show up, the first thing that they gave us to eat was a bologna sandwich on white bread. And I open it up and there's literally 4 dead flies in it. And I'm like, what?
Yes, like, extra protein.
I'm like, are we? So I didn't eat anything. They ended up keeping us. They gave us $1 million bail for each of us, and it was 54. So the union couldn't bail us out. So we just spend days in jail.
And then at that point you got to wait for your hearing, right? You basically stay in jail till your hearing.
Exactly. And so no kind of like lefty white guy from the Bay Area has more friends that are like pimps and gangsters from Houston than me, because I was just quickly like
just making friends,
making friends as much as I could. People were like getting jumped in there like crazy, and I was just like not going out like that. So I'm good at meeting people, and I just ended up meeting everyone I could and kept safe for the many days I was in Houston downtown jail. I mean, the other arrests are literally like the amount of work you have to do in the Bay Area when you're protesting, because they know we want the arrest, you know? So like the amount, like most of the arrests in the Bay, literally, like you call them beforehand, like, hey, will you arrest us? They say yes. And then they drive you about 5 blocks down after they put you in the paddy wagon, and then drop like
let you back out.
Let you back out. It's like they understand.
Like, you got a fake badge of honor. Your activism credit is fabricated.
So like I've been arrested many times when it's like, yeah, I'm in handcuffs for a little bit, escorted by the police, but that one was real. But I was purposely, trying to do that. The one in Houston was, I was trying to get out in an hour, not spend way too much time in Houston jail.
When I always look at it, I figure if you go somewhere looking for a fight, you'll always be able to find one. I'm never going to be mean to a cop. Like, I understand the power dynamic there. I'm like, it's one of the few points where I will be like, yes, sir. Like, I'm in cop mode. I'm not gonna I'm gonna be nice, on my best behavior. And I have other friends that it's like they see a cop and that like something in their brain breaks. And I'm like, dude, why? Why would you want any more attention from somebody that can truly just like fuck up your whole life just because they're like decided they don't like you?
I think you are very smart, and my 41-year-old self totally agrees with you, but my 24-year-old punk self was pretty lippy with the police. But yeah, in general,
and you have smart people behind you too. Like, that the worse that it goes, the bigger the story builds in that type of situation. Like, it could go bad, but really.
Yeah, I was a lobbyist. So for a lot of these, I was called the police liaison. So we would go and fuck up shit. And we'd have 500 people in a McDonald's and put all the cars and just put them in the wrong way in the drive-thru.
Lift them up and go sideways.
Just all this crazy shit. And then I would have to go talk to the police, and it was one of my favorite things in life. Because
you're like the person at the house party that has to go take the noise citation.
Yeah, but I just got pretty good at it. I'm like, hello, officer. Yeah, we're just exercising our First Amendment rights here. The Constitution. We would never do anything against the Constitution, but we would definitely take our constitutional rights to get and voice our opinion about what is going on here. And they'd be like, you got to move people, or you have to move these people. And I'd be like, I wish in my head, I'm as powerful as I can just snap my finger and get 500 people to do whatever I want. But I'm not that powerful. And I don't know if you are either, sir. So I think we're going to have to sit here
and let this one run its course.
You run its course so that everybody is happy. And it would just I would do it on repeat for hours and hours until eventually it's they'd get their riot gear or something, and all right, and then
you're like, hey guys, settle it down just a little bit.
But literally it was set up so that instantly I could just be like, hey, you gotta go. And it's like I did have the power to get 500 people to leave, but it's not like you're going to tell.
But you're not going to say
like,
that. Yeah, exactly. Well, and so okay, that's fascinating. That's awesome, because that's way more. I don't know if organized is even the right word. I mean, yeah, it's more organized than I would have realized, but yeah, it really does kind of bring into question, like, what can you do to McDonald's that's going to give it enough pain to even care?
Yeah.
Because that's literally you're not going to do it through lobbying, like at the White House, probably. Like, you're not going to get anything done. So you have those, did you ever, I think it's Eric Liu, maybe, Reading and Writing Power. He had a TED Ed on it. Oh, it's super cool. So it like breaks down the different forms of power and then like the different uses of it. So there's like, military might, there's money, there's, whatever, fear, repercussion, policy, and then there's like social or like ideas. And so there's only a few that are actually available to citizens, but when you get enough people together, like they are, if you can't enact the military power to shut something down, they're pretty hard to even beat with money or just, sheer policy or forces if there's enough people that are behind it and passionate about it. And then it breaks down like what policy actually does, which is like barriers for the flow of power. And then it talks through the dynamics of like power is always, it's never static. So it's always building or draining, basically. So like if somebody is not, if you're not acting, you're being acted upon whether or not you know it. And it's a super cool breakdown of like how to be a participant in civic life, basically. Like basically it's like, take the right, you have just as much right to understand power, see how it's organized, and then go be a part of that system to write it as, anybody else does.
I mean, I think that's super insightful. I think for me, it's always like, there was a quote of like JFK meeting with MLK, and MLK, like JFK said, or MLK saying like, we need civil rights, and JFK saying like, make me. And then MLK shows up and with 1 million people in Washington, D.C. and does the I Have a Dream speech and makes him. Like, he wasn't saying even in a bad way, but I just think like you have to understand that politicians need cover, because just doing the status quo is the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah.
So you have to like almost give them cover. So like when we were pushing and we got the biggest increase in the minimum wage in the country, we were literally like showing up at the airport, and we would get in. All these legislators took Southwest so you can sit next to them, and we would just wait. And we knew the flights that they got on from Southern California on Monday mornings. We'd book 10 people in each one of those flights
just to make sure somebody was next to him.
And we would talk to him the whole time. And he'd be like, am I really going to have to, like, every flight I'm in the rest of my life, have to talk to people that are asking me why I'm not going to help poor people in California? Yeah. And like, just like being resourceful, going all out, and then giving people like, shit, I guess I really do have to do something, because the status quo is just easy to keep doing.
Yeah, because inherently anything new, you're doing nothing but taking risk. That's like, yeah, I wish if anything that I'd learned earlier is asking in the sense of like local politics, stuff like that. Believing that because you have a good idea and it makes sense, that asking somebody to at least consider it will get you a positive response. Because I would have so much less frustration if I would have like understood it as, oh, they have nothing but risk by trying anything new. And they either have to be like, they have their own lives, they have kids, they have all these things that I, as a younger person, didn't have to even consider, like, understand. I wish I could have been better at working with city officials. I totally would have taken the side of like, yeah, make us the bad guy, I don't care. But like, I wish there was a way to like, end up having that conversation of like, hey, we want to do really cool stuff. We're going to do it positively. Let us like whatever, give us the wink, where we know we're not going to like, whatever, kill our careers or whatever. And let's try some stuff. And if it doesn't work, then like, yeah, just say that we suck and we'll take the hate.
I mean, I think for NFTs, one of the best things for me is just understanding win-wins. And so like with the Stoics, it's like creating win-win opportunities where you're incentivizing people to show up and be active. And I think like, politics is the same. Like I'm always trying to like actually find mutually beneficial deals. I think so many times it's like people try to view it as like winner take all, and that just doesn't work. And I think in NFTs, there's a lot of people that are just trying to get theirs at the moment, and they're not kind of maybe just taking a more holistic, like the big on top view is like you're actually helping people and you're going out of your way to do it. And then you're creating relationships that are, mutually beneficial. You just have a good chance of success.
Yeah. Well, and for as much speaking of the long term as there is, a lot of times it doesn't end up I don't know if the follow through, the mindset is very either short term. Like right now, I'm like, it's a great time to be working on something because like, yeah, I'm not paying attention to the prices on stuff. Like I'm working, like if you see enough cycles, you're like, oh, okay, that cycle happened. And then you can look at the people that have succeeded in the past and be like, all right, so if you stay through a couple of cycles, like there's no point, like the down cycle, you're not going to speed it up. There's no point in like freaking out about it constantly. Like just try to not get wiped out by the hype cycle. And if you can make it through a couple and just keep building, I don't know. It's probably not any different than the seasons of life, but
no. But I think that's a very important insight, and I remember reading something that like one of my favorite artists, George Condo, his best years of selling art were 2008, 2009, because it was like he was an alternative asset class for the wealthy.
Oh, interesting.
So like, even though like the market as a whole was tanking and the art market was terrible, it was great for him. And like, I don't know, 2 days ago, I just sold by far my most expensive like painting and a ton of work, to be honest. And I think we're going to start to get to that point. And so I think it's just understanding the cycles, and like where I was, like I knew that there would eventually be this cycle, and I was trying to get myself to the point where I was like I've been saying it for a year and a half. It's finally came to fruition of like being recession proof, like being someone where people know I have a long career. I've been here. I'm not leaving. I have a breadth of work. And then also like, just
basically being a good bet.
Exactly. In a crazy market, people still need to put their money somewhere, and art's a good place if it's someone who they actually think is a good bet. And so I've tried to position myself as a good bet for collectors. And so far, knock on wood, but I haven't really, like, my stuff's still been selling, and I haven't had this giant floor price crush or anything. And so I hope you've
been stashing enough to like be able to just grind through anything that comes your way.
Yeah, that's the advantage of selling physical stuff. I just made enough 2 days ago to last for a year.
So you're saying, so do you pair your stuff, or is it a mix?
This was just a traditional collector.
Oh,
so
cool.
It was not it had nothing to do with NFTs.
That's awesome. How's it feel to bridge that gap? Because were you in that market already before you got into NFTs, or no?
I had a pretty good Instagram following, and I always just made myself kind of hard because I was working literally was working my ass off. So like trying to sell work on Instagram, like it was, if you got one of my pieces in the last 5 or 6 years, the chances that you had to DM me like 8 times and I would actually finally like kind of like sell it to you. But like, I kind of was just always betting on myself. And I knew that at some point I was going to like jump in and do the marketing and really try to push it as an artist. But like trying to sell stuff when you haven't done that, I just like everything I sold the last couple of years was like usually no more than $3,000 was like the most I was getting for any piece, which is fine. It's a good price for a painting.
And it's all
but
relative.
like now my stuff is going for 10, 20x of that. And it's like, I didn't need the money at the time. So like, I wish I hadn't almost sold any painting ever prior to right now. So if I had every painting I ever did, like they'd be worth a lot more right now than they ever sold for.
But that's the thing with hindsight is you never like, that's why you find, Rembrandt in a trash can or something is because like all those artists, like everybody has to start somewhere. You can go like eradicate all of your old work to like beef up or make your scarcity lower. But I feel like anyway, it's at a certain like, well, I guess that actually it depends. There was another comment in the room before this that maybe would speak against the side of like, if they were talking about their followings, got a lot more followers than I have people that bought works. And so you end up with people that it's like, they're going to have stuff. I've got stuff that I made that like people will send me a photo of and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot. That was when I was doing my own vinyl for metal prints because like I was like, then I can make a good profit on it. And it's like something I've touched. So it was cool. But I was like, shit, dude, there's probably only like 10 of those that even exist. But it makes for some cool gems that aren't in the catalog.
Right. No, I think that's really cool. I mean, I don't know. Picasso had like 55,000 works out and like no one's like mad that like he did that many and he still has a good market. So it's not a super worry for me.
Yeah. And I was going to say Sabet is another one. He talks about his basically, like, he says everybody is always like saying you need to do less work or put less stuff out. Do you have thoughts on that? You don't have to, but.
I mean, Sabet's one of my best friends in the space. We don't necessarily have the exact same philosophy when it comes to minting. He definitely mints a lot more than me, but I think he's one of the most important people in this space for his kind of stance. When I got in, it was all about 101s and super scarcity and maybe 4 releases a year sort of thing. And they were all 101s. Like that was like kind of the way people talked about it. And I just had so much more success having editions that were reasonably priced that could get more people in. And so I think, and to be honest, a lot of that with Sabet has been my coaching with him too. And he would say the same to you. Like he's coached me on a million things, but I think early on I kind of convinced him like editions under $1,000 is the sweet spot. And so, all to say we share a lot of strategy. I think I do think it's important to make people money, but you can, as long as you have demand, he usually sells out because people want his work. So he always has the demand. And I think if you're releasing it to no demand, then that's when you really should be cutting back what you're selling.
Yeah. Last, I guess, wrap up question would be then, have you seen the style change, like your style of working through things since you began?
Well, the Stoics is the first time I'm ever trying to do a PFP project that's generated, even though it comes from like literally hundreds of drawings that I did. They kind of all have masks. It's not one that has like weird pipes or crazy eyes that interchangeable. It's the mask and the backgrounds that will make it unique, one of one type of thing. And so that's a brand new way for me to do stuff. I've also just adding a little bit more collage elements, I guess, with my work when I'm selling 101s. So I've just tried to add more and more depth because I think sometimes they're really like a lot of NFT art's kind of flat and doesn't have depth. And like my take is if you add all these cool Easter eggs, like when people start having these giant NFT screens in their living room, people are going to start to see all these little hidden messages I've put in there. And like, I think it'll like help re-energize the market a little bit for my work. We're like, holy shit, like he actually
like embedded all of this.
He embedded all this like deep mystery in his works that no one had seen, or very few people have ever kind of taken the time to do. So like
playing the risk game.
Yeah, just long term, trying to think of cool ways that will like maybe slowly unlock like what people get out of a particular piece. And so you know, I'm just going to keep innovating, it's not just NFTs for NFT's sake. It's like, I think NFTs are a tool that can make your art cooler. I've gone to these big shows, and like right now, like the big art world is really boring. And so I kind of think NFTs can make it not boring and really spectacular. But to me, it is like, how are you innovating? What are the cool things you're doing with the tool, and not just making NFTs to say you made an NFT?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And thank you so much for coming on, Gabe. That was an awesome chat. And whether or not we get to chat again, I wish you the very best, and good luck on the upcoming one.
I really appreciate you. That was an awesome interview. That was the least I've ever talked about NFTs and an NFT podcast in the best sort of way. So it was awesome to kind of talk more about all the other stuff that life has to offer. So I appreciate you, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on and being open. So we will talk to you later.
All right. Take care. Have a good one.